In the 1870s, in Montana, land was the only real hope a man had. Elias Harding knew that better than anyone. On that morning when the floodwaters swallowed his farm along the Sweetwater River, he didn't just lose his crop. He lost the last flicker of hope he'd been clinging to. 3 years of backbreaking labor vanished in a single night, just like his wife 2 years earlier, taken by consumption's cruel grip. Now he faced another biting winter alone, with no hand to steady him, no living soul to stand shoulder to shoulder through the storm. What he did that day at the town auction, well, he never imagined he'd stoop to it. But desperation has a way of pushing folks to the edge, especially a man who's already tumbled over and lost everything worth holding on to. Oh, it's the kind of story that tugs at your heart, isn't it? The quiet ache of a life unraveling, thread by fragile thread, until someone steps in and starts weaving it back together. Let me take you there, gentle as a Montana breeze, but with all the raw emotion of a heart laid bare. The town market in Eagle Creek was buzzing that day, alive with the clamor of voices and the earthy scent of hay and sweat-soaked leather. Loud haggling and bursts of laughter filled the air as merchants hawked their wares under the vast prairie sky, the sun hanging high like a watchful eye. In the center of the square, on a rough wooden platform, stood a gray-haired auctioneer, mid-shout about a string of horses up for bid, his voice booming like thunder rolling over the plains. Elias hadn't come for the horses. Truth be told, he wasn't even sure why he'd dragged himself into town at all. Maybe it was just running from the silence that waited back at the farm, that heavy, echoing quiet that pressed in on him like a coffin lid creaking shut. He stood at the edge of the crowd, hat pulled low over eyes shadowed by too many sleepless nights, his 45 years etched deep in the lines around them and the bitter fold at the corners of his mouth. Hard work and harder losses had worn him down, leaving a man who moved like he carried the weight of the world on shoulders already bowed. He watched the auction with a weary gaze, half lost in his own thoughts, when something shifted in the air, something unusual, like a shadow falling unexpected across the sun. Oscar Bailey, the town jailer, a burly man with a scowl etched permanent as a scar, climbed up to the platform, leading a young woman by a rope tied loose around her wrists. Her hands were bound just tight enough to remind her of her place, her clothes torn and caked with the grime of hard days and harder nights, her head bowed low as if the weight of the world had already broken her neck. Her eyes, though tired as they were, skated across the dirt like she was searching for an escape that wasn't there. The auctioneer cleared his throat with a gravelly hack, and the crowd hushed, that expectant ripple spreading like a stone dropped in still water. "Ladies and gentlemen," the auctioneer boomed, his voice dripping with that false cheer they all used to dress up the ugly. "We've got a special lot today. This here's young Miss Sarah McAllister, 19 years old and full of fire. She's been our guest in the town jail for 3 months now, ever since the sheriff caught her with sticky fingers on a loaf of bread. By the judge's order, she can work off her sentence. Strong, healthy girl, fit for a year's labor. The high bidder takes her services, and the proceeds go straight to the town coffers. Who'll start us off?" Elias's stomach twisted at the sight, a knot of nausea rising like bile. It wasn't unheard of on the frontier, selling off convicts for labor, turning debt and desperation into dollars. But something about this girl felt wrong, off-kilter like a wagon wheel wobbling loose. She didn't look like the usual thief, eyes sly and mouth curled in defiance. No, there was no vice in her gaze, just a deep, startled fear and maybe, a spark of quiet challenge that said she hadn't given up yet, not entirely. "Opening bid $20, the auctioneer called, pounding his gavel like a judge's verdict. "25, came a gravelly shout from the back. A grizzled old hotel owner, known around Eagle Creek for his wandering eyes and wandering hands when it came to young women, his leer spreading slow as molasses. "30, shot back another voice, sharp and oily. Frank Wilson, the town's saloon keeper, his face flushed with the kind of hunger that turned men's souls sour, owner of the brothel down by the tracks where dreams went to die in dim-lit rooms. Elias's fists clenched at his sides, knuckles whitening under the calluses, a low heat building in his chest like a fire kindling slow. He knew exactly what fate waited for her if those bids won out. The hotel man's rough hands or Wilson's den of shadows, where a girl like her would be ground down to nothing in 10 years flat, her spirit worn thin as an old coin, all dreams shattered on the rocks of men's greed. Oh, it burned in him, that injustice, hot and familiar, stirring memories of his own losses, the way life could strip a person bare and leave them reaching for scraps. $40, he said suddenly, the words bursting out before he could swallow them back. His own voice surprising him with its steadiness, cutting through the murmur like a rifle crack. The crowd turned as one, heads swiveling to see who dared throw in such a bid, whispers rippling out like wind through dry grass. Elias Harding wasn't the type for auctions, especially not ones trading in human misery. He was the quiet farmer on the edge of town, the man who kept to himself and his fields, not one to raise his voice or his hand in a crowd. 50? Wilson snarled, locking eyes with Elias across the throng, his stare cold as a snake's, promising trouble if the bid held. 60? Elias shot back, meeting that gaze square, his jaw set like granite, the heat in his chest flaring brighter, fueled by something he couldn't name. Pity, maybe, or the ghost of his own loneliness staring back from the girl's downcast face. Contempt flickered in Wilson's eyes, a sneer twisting his lip. 70. Elias swallowed hard, throat dry as the dust underfoot. He had money left, scraped from the last good harvest, tucked away for seed to plant come spring, the fragile thread holding his farm from ruin. Spend it now, and next year brought nothing but empty fields and hollow hunger. But when he glanced at the girl again, who lifted her head for the first time and met his eyes, those wide, startled pools of brown holding a mix of fear and faint, flickering hope, something stirred in him, deep and unbidden, like a long-dormant seed cracking open under rain. $100, he said, the words resolute as a vow, voice carrying clear over the hush. The hotel man and Wilson exchanged a glance, sour as vinegar, then both turned away with mutters under breath. $100 was big money for a serving girl, even a year's worth, too steep for the casual cruelty of their wants. $100 once, 100 twice. The girl goes to Elias Harding for 1 year. Sold. Elias stepped forward through the parting crowd, his boots heavy on the packed dirt, heart thumping a steady drum in his ears. Bailey untied the rope from the girl's wrists with a grunt, the rough hemp falling away like a shed skin, then shoved a sheaf of papers into Elias's hand, yellowed contracts and a judge's scrawl. "She's yours now," the jailer said, voice flat as a slammed door. 1 year free and clear, long as she don't bolt. If she runs, sheriff posts her wanted and it's your loss. Hunt's on you. Elias nodded, jaw tight, then turned to the girl, who stood there rubbing her wrists, eyes fixed on the ground like it held all the answers the world denied. "Come on," he said, voice softer than he meant, gesturing to the wagon at the square's edge. "Let's get out of here." Sarah followed without a word, her steps silent as a shadow's, climbing into the wagon beside him as he unhitched the team and climbed up, reins slapping leather. The crowd's eyes burned on their backs as the wheels creaked to life, rolling out of Eagle Creek in a cloud of dust that felt like a veil between old lives and whatever came next. Neither spoke a word the whole way, the only sound the rattle of harness and the low groan of axles on the rutted road, the vast Montana sky stretching overhead like an indifferent witness. Elias kept his eyes on the horses, jaw set, mind churning with questions he didn't dare voice. The girl sat rigid beside him, gaze lost to the horizon, as if willing the plains to swallow her whole. It wasn't until the farm's silhouette rose faint against the late sun, that weathered cluster of buildings hunkered against the wind, that Elias broke the silence, his voice rough from disuse. "Sarah McAllister, right?" She nodded, a single jerk of her chin, but her eyes stayed fixed ahead, distant as the hills.
"I'm Elias Harding."
"Got a place along the Sweetwater, about 20 miles out from town. Doesn't matter where it is?" she murmured, so quiet he almost missed it over the wind, her voice flat as the prairie grass. "One prison's as good as another." Elias blinked, surprised by the bite in her tone, but said nothing, letting the words hang heavy between them. Somewhere deep, he understood that bitterness all too well. The way loss could sour a soul until every door looked like bars, every road a chain. "Why'd you steal, Sarah?" he asked finally, when the silence stretched too thin, the question slipping out gentle, not accusing, just a man reaching across the gulf. She turned then, for the first time meeting his eyes full, and in those brown depths swam anger and pain intertwined like barbed wire. "I was hungry," she said, voice low but steady, each word weighted with the truth of it. "3 days without a bite when I took that loaf. But what does it matter to you? You're just another man buying a girl like livestock." Elias thought on that, the wagon jolting over a rut that jarred his teeth. Why had he? He could have walked away, let Wilson or the hotel man have her for their shadows. Money tight as a noose for seed and survival. But her eyes? Or maybe his own empty farm, echoing with ghosts. "I need help on the place," he said at last, voice even, meeting her gaze without flinching. "I'm alone there. Animals to tend. House to keep from falling down around my ears." Sarah let out a bitter laugh, short and sharp as a whip crack. "And for that, you paid $100. Could have hired help cheaper than a thief's ransom." Elias had no answer for that. Not one that made sense, even to him. Maybe it was the look in her eyes when Wilson bid, that flash of terror no girl should know. Or maybe, just maybe, it was the mirror she held up to his own hollow days, reminding him what it felt like to be cornered with no way out but forward. As the wagon creaked closer to the farm, the landscape grew harsher, more unforgiving. The flood scars laid bare in muddy fields pocked with debris. The river's old banks gnawed raw like open wounds. "There," Elias said, nodding to the low shape rising against the horizon. A simple wooden house, weathered but sturdy, flanked by barn and outbuildings that spoke of better days. "That's home." Sarah scanned the holdings, and Elias caught the brief widening of her eyes. Surprise, maybe, or the ghost of relief. She'd braced for a crumbling shack, not a real farm, fields though scarred still promising under the right hand. Elias reined the team to a halt in the yard, dust settling soft around the wheels, then turned to help her down, his calloused hand steady under her elbow. She stepped light, like she feared the ground might give way. He felt the need to explain, words tumbling awkward. "You know, it'll be better here than the jail. Better than the other places bidding on you." Her face hardened, jaw tight as a trap. "I know what waited in Wilson's house," she said, voice flat but edged with old pain. "The kind of better that breaks a girl slow." Elias nodded, throat tight. "That's why I bid. Wasn't gonna let that happen." She searched his face then, eyes narrowing like she was weighing his soul against a scale. "Still don't get why you paid so much. $100 could have bought a team of mules. Not a thief with a year to serve." He sighed, pushing open the door to the house, hinges creaking like old bones. "Come on in. We'll figure it out." The place hit her like a wave. The cold hearth, dust thick as grief on every surface, the air stale with a man's solitary sorrow. It looked like the home of someone broken, pieces scattered and left. "2 years back, I lost my wife," Elias said quiet, voice rough as the floorboards underfoot. "Consumption took her quick. Since then, it's just been me." Sarah nodded slow, taking it in, the sparse table, the single chair worn smooth from use, the silence that hung heavy as smoke. "The flood took this year's crop," she said, voice soft but sure. "You had seed money tucked away for next. Now it's gone on me. What now?" Elias shrugged, shoulders heavy. "We'll figure something. Always do." She glanced around the small space. Kitchen flowing into living room, 2 bedrooms off a short hall, all potential under a caring touch. "That smaller room's yours," he said, nodding to a door cracked open, shadows soft inside. "Was my wife's before. Well before." "Thanks," she murmured, and Elias caught the shift. The bitterness ebbing from her voice like mist burning off at dawn. A crack in the wall she'd built high. Maybe she was starting to see he meant no harm, no chains beyond the law's cold word. The first days slipped by in a quiet rhythm of work. the kind that fills silence without needing words. Sarah took to the house like it was a puzzle she'd always known how to solve. Sweeping dust from corners long forgotten, stirring pots over the rekindled stove with a grace that turned chores to art, the air filling with scents of bread and stew that chased the ghosts away. Elias threw himself into the fields and barn, mending fences battered by flood, tending stock that lowed grateful for fresh hay, but always with an eye to the horizon, half expecting trouble to ride in on the wind. They barely spoke those days, each lost in their own whirl of thoughts, Elias wrestling the why of his reckless bid, Sarah turning over the strangeness of a man who saw her as more than chattel. But on the third evening, as Elias trudged in from the fields, boots caked mud, the farm greeted him changed, warm light spilling from windows like invitation, the air rich with the yeasty promise of fresh bread. Sarah stood at the stove, pulling a golden loaf from the oven, her hair tied back with a scrap of cloth, sleeves rolled to elbows. "Never knew we had flour," Elias said, surprise softening his voice, hat in hand like a boy caught off guard. Sarah offered a faint smile, the first he'd seen, small, but real as sunrise. Found a sack in the cellar and a few cans too. Figured it was time. He sat at the table she'd wiped clean, the meal simple but steaming. Rabbit stew from a snare he'd forgotten, bread warm and crusty. For the first time in longer than he could recall, the house felt less like a tomb and more like a home, the silence companionable instead of crushing. Over supper, Elias mustered the courage to bridge the gap. "Where you from, Sarah?" "Before all this." She set her fork down, eyes distant as the river's bend. "East from Pennsylvania. Father's farm went under when he passed. Mother remarried quick, but the stepfather, he didn't take to me. Too many mouths," he said. Elias nodded slow, understanding dawning like light through cracks. "You ran." She met his eyes then, steady despite the shadow. "Thought the West would be better. Fresh start, wide open. But it hit harder than I figured. No work for a girl alone, no roof without strings. Ended up taking that loaf, 'cause 3 days empty'll make a saint steal." Elias leaned back, the weight of her words settling heavy. "And now you're here, paying for it." Sarah's laugh came bitter, short as a sigh. "One prison to the next. That's the West for you. Freedom for some, chains for the rest." He thought on that through the quiet clink of spoons, the fire crackling soft. "I had he bid. Could have let Wilson claim her for his shadows, saved the seed money for spring's gamble." But her eyes in that moment, lifting to his across the crowd. Fear, yes, but a spark too, like embers under ash. Or maybe it was his own empty farm echoing back at him, the loneliness a mirror to hers. "I need help on the place," he said at last, voice even, meeting her gaze without flinching or pity. "Alone's no way to run a farm. Animals don't tend themselves. House falls to ruin without a hand. $100 or 10, that's the truth of it." Sarah studied him long, fork paused midair, as if weighing his soul against some inner scale. "Could have hired cheaper than a thief's year." Elias had no tidy answer, not one that made sense even to his own heart. Maybe it was the look in her eyes when Wilson bid, that flash of terror no young woman should ever know, the kind that stirs a man's blood to protect what he can't explain. Or maybe, just maybe, it was the mirror she held up to his own hollow days, reminding him sharp what it felt like to be cornered with no path but the one you carve yourself. As the wagon creaked closer to the farm that first evening, the landscape grew harsher, more unforgiving in the fading light. The flood scars lay bare in muddy fields pocked with debris like the bones of drowned giants. The river's old banks gnawed raw and ragged like open wounds that refused to close, the earth still bearing the marks of water's wrath in slick, treacherous patches that sucked at the wheels. "There she is," Elias said, nodding to the low, sturdy shape rising against the horizon like a sentinel worn but unbowed. A simple wooden house weathered gray by wind and winter but holding strong, flanked by the barn's sagging bulk and smaller outbuildings that spoke of better days and harder hands. "That's home, such as it is." Sarah scanned the holdings with a slow sweep, and Elias caught the brief widening of her eyes, surprise flickering quick, or perhaps the ghost of relief chasing away the dread she'd carried like a stone. She'd braced her heart for a crumbling shack, walls leaning like drunks after last call. Not a real farm with fields, scarred though they were, still whispering promise under the right touch and time. Elias reined the team to a halt in the yard, dust settling soft around the wheels like a sigh, then turned to help her down. His calloused hands steady under her elbow, calluses rough as the life that made them but grip gentle as he could make it. She stepped light onto the packed earth, like she feared the ground might shift and swallow her whole, her weight feather-soft in his palm. He felt the sudden need to explain, words tumbling awkward from a throat unused to company. You know, it'll be better here than the jail ever was. Better than the other places bidding on you back there, the ones with shadows in their eyes. Her face hardened then, jaw setting tight as a trapped spring, the faint hope shuddering quick. I know what waited in Wilson's house, she said, voice flat but edged with the old pain that lingered like smoke from a doused fire. The kind of better that breaks a girl slow, day by day, till there's nothing left but the shell. Elias nodded, throat tight with the truth of it, the ugly underbelly of the frontier he knew too well. That's why I did what I did. Wasn't gonna stand by and let that happen. Not to you, not on my watch. She searched his face then, eyes narrowing sharp like she was weighing his soul on some inner scale hidden deep, testing for the lie or the pity that soured every kindness she'd known. Still don't get why you paid so much for a thief's year. $100 could have bought a team of mules strong, not a girl with debts and dirt for a name. He sighed heavy, pushing open the door to the house with a creak of hinges like old bones protesting the cold. The air inside stirring faint with dust motes dancing in the slanting light. Come on in. We'll figure it out. One day at a time. The place hit her like a wave crashing unexpected. The cold hearth gaping black as an empty promise, dust lying thick as grief's own blanket on every surface from mantel to floorboard. The air stale and heavy with the scent of a man's solitary sorrow, the kind that seeps into walls and lingers like regret. It looked every inch the home of someone broken inside, pieces scattered and left where they fell, waiting for a hand that never came to set them right. 2 years back, I lost my wife, Elias said quiet, voice rough as the splintered floorboards under his boots. The words hanging heavy in the still air like smoke from a fire long cold. Consumption took her quick, ruthless as a Montana winter. Since then, it's just been me, rattling around in the quiet. Sarah nodded slow, taking it all in with eyes that missed nothing. The sparse table scarred from years of lone meals, the single chair worn smooth as a prayer from too much sitting in thought, the silence that hung between them thick and companionable in its way but aching all the same. The flood took this year's crop clean, she said, voice soft but sure as the river that birthed it. No pity in her tone, just the plain fact of shared hardship. You had seed money tucked away careful for next spring's gamble. Now it's gone on me. What now when the ground's hungry too? Elias shrugged, shoulders heavy under the weight of it all, but his eyes held steady on hers. We'll figure something, always do, one way or the other. That's the frontier for you. She glanced around the small space then, kitchen flowing open into living room with its hearth like a heart gone still, 2 bedrooms branching off a short hall that echoed with absence, all of it brimming with potential under a caring touch, a woman's hand to chase the dust and breathe life back into the bones. That smaller room's yours, he said, nodding to a door cracked open just a sliver, shadows soft and inviting inside, the faint scent of lavender lingering like a ghost of better days. Was my wife's before? Well, before the quiet came. Thanks, she murmured, the word hanging soft, and Elias caught the shift in her voice. The bitterness ebbing away like mist burning off at the first light of dawn, a crack appearing in the high wall she'd built around her heart from years of blows that left bruises inside and out. Maybe she was starting to see him clear, not as another chain in her sentence, but a man with his own ghosts, offering not pity but a hand up from the mud. The first days slipped by in a hush of work that filled the hours without demanding words, the kind of rhythm that lets 2 wary souls circle each other slow, learning the shape of trust. Sarah took to the house like it was a puzzle she'd always known the pieces for, sweeping dust from corners long forgotten under beds and behind the stove, stirring pots over the rekindled hearth with a grace that turned drudgery to something almost artful. the air filling slow with scents of rising bread and simmering stew that chased the ghosts from the rafters, making the place feel less like a tomb and more like a home stirring awake. Elias threw himself into the fields and barn with the single-minded focus of a man fighting to keep the world from crumbling further, mending fences battered flat by the flood's fury, tending to the stock that lowed grateful for fresh hay forked from the loft, but always with an eye to the horizon, half expecting the past to ride in on a cloud of dust and take what little he had left. They barely spoke those first days, words sparse as rain in drought, Elias lost in the whirl of his own whys, the reckless bid still echoing like a fool's echo. Sarah turning over the strangeness of a man who looked at her not with hunger or scorn but something quieter, harder to name. But on the third evening, as Elias trudged in from the fields with the sun dipping low and painting the yard in gold, boots caked thick with mud that sucked at every step, the farm greeted him transformed. Warm light spilling soft from the windows like an invitation long overdue, the air rich with the yeasty, comforting promise of fresh-baked bread wafting on the breeze, pulling him forward like a memory he thought lost. Sarah stood at the stove inside, pulling a golden-crusted loaf from the oven with oven-mitt hands steady as a surgeon's. Her hair tied back simple with a scrap of cloth from the rag bin, sleeves rolled to elbows bearing arms strong from whatever life had thrown before the jail. "Never knew we had flour hiding," Elias said, surprise softening the rough edge of his voice, hat clutched in hands like a boy caught peeking at secrets. Sarah turned, offering a faint smile, the first he'd seen on her, small and tentative as a crocus pushing through snow, but real enough to catch the light and warm something long cold in his chest. "Found a sack in the cellar, tucked behind jars and a few cans too, enough for this, at least. Figured it was time the place smelled like living again." He sank into the chair at the table she'd wiped clean of its dust shroud, the meal simple but steaming with life. Rabbit stew from a snare he'd set and forgotten in his grief, chunks tender and broth thick with carrot and onion scavenged from the root cellar, bread warm and crusty beside it, butter churned fresh from the milk the cow still gave faithful. For the first time in longer than memory allowed, the house felt less like a hollow shell echoing with absence and more like a home stirring back to breath, the silence between them companionable now, soft as the fire's crackle in the hearth. Over supper, with the clink of spoons against bowls the only underscore, Elias mustered the courage to bridge the gulf, his voice low and careful as he set down his fork. "Where you from, Sarah? Before all this mess caught you up?" She paused, fork hovering, eyes drifting distant to the window where the prairie stretched endless under twilight's hush. "East, from Pennsylvania, a little farm tucked in the hills where the soil was kind once. Father's place went under when he passed sudden, heart gave out mid-plow. Mother remarried quick as spring thaw, but the stepfather, he didn't take to me," said too many mouths at table already, too little to go around. Elias nodded slow, the pieces falling into place with a quiet ache he knew too well, the way loss ripples out, taking more than it claims at first. "You ran from it all." She met his eyes then, steady despite the shadow clouding them, voice even but laced with the old pain that lingered like smoke from a fire long doused. "Thought the West would be better, wider, fresh start with room to breathe, no eyes judging every step. But it hit harder than I figured, no work for a girl with no kin, no roof without strings attached that cut deep. Ended up taking that loaf, 'cause 3 days empty will make even a saint's hand shake toward the shelf." Elias leaned back in the chair, the wood creaking soft under him, the weight of her words settling heavy as the silence that followed. "And now you're here, paying the piper for it with a year of your freedom." Sarah's laugh came then, bitter and short as a whip's crack in the still air, but it didn't reach her eyes. "One prison to the next, that's the West for some of us. Freedom's just a word for folks with coin enough to buy it." He thought on that through the quiet clink of spoons against bowls, the fire crackling its low song in the hearth like an old friend humming along. Why had he bid so fierce? Could have turned his back, let Wilson or the hotel man claim her for their particular brands of shadow, saved the seed money for spring's desperate gamble on the soil. But her eyes in that moment, lifting to his across the crowd's murmur. Fear raw as an open wound, yes, but a spark too, faint embers under ash waiting for breath to fan them. Or maybe it was his own empty farm echoing back at him sharp, the loneliness a mirror held up to hers, reminding him with a pang what it felt like to be cornered tight with no path out but the one you hack with your own hands. "I need help on the place," he said at last, voice even and true, meeting her gaze without flinching or the pity that soured every kindness she'd likely known. "Alone's no way to keep a farm breathing. Animals don't tend to fences or feed themselves. House falls to ruin without a hand to chase the dust and stir the pots. $100 or 10. That's the plain truth of it, no more, no less." Sarah studied him long and searching. Fork paused midair as if weighing his soul on some inner scale hidden deep in her chest, testing for the lie or the pity or the hidden hook that always came with a man's kindness. "Could have hired cheaper than a thief's year on the block," she said finally, voice quiet but not accusing, just laying the fact bare like a card on the table. Elias had no tidy answer for that, not one that made sense even to his own heart tangled in its own knots. Maybe it was the look in her eyes when Wilson bid, that flash of terror no young woman should ever have to know, the kind that stirs a man's blood to protect what he can't quite explain. Or maybe, just maybe, it was the mirror she held up to his own hollow days without Martha, the farm's quiet echo of her absence, reminding him sharp and sudden what it felt like to be utterly, achingly alone in a world that kept turning without you. As the wagon creaked its weary way closer to the farm that first golden evening, the landscape unfolding around them grew harsher, more unforgiving in the fading light that painted the hills in long, somber shadows. The flood scars laid bare and brutal in muddy fields pocked with the debris of uprooted trees and shattered fences like the bones of drowned giants scattered by some angry god. The river's old banks gnawed raw and ragged like open wounds that refused to knit, the earth still, bearing the marks of water's wrath in slick, treacherous patches that sucked at the wheels with greedy insistence, threatening to bog them down in memory's mud. "There she is," Elias said, his voice carrying a note of quiet pride mixed with the ache of what had been lost, nodding to the low, sturdy shape rising against the horizon like a sentinel worn by wind and winter but unbowed in its vigil. A simple wooden house weathered gray as a wolf's coat but holding strong against the elements, flanked by the barn's sagging but solid bulk and smaller outbuildings that huddled close like faithful dogs, speaking in their rough-hewn lines of better days and the harder hands that had built them with sweat and swear. "That's home, such as it is, battered but ours for the mending." Sarah scanned the holdings with a slow, sweeping gaze that took in every detail. The scarred fields whispering of floods past but promising under the right care, the outbuildings sturdy despite the years, the house itself a beacon of sorts in the vastness. And Elias caught the brief widening of her eyes, a flicker of surprise chasing away the dread she'd carried like a stone in her chest, or perhaps the ghost of relief blooming faint, like the first green shoot after a hard rain. She'd braced her heart for a crumbling shack with walls leaning like drunks after last call, roof patched with desperation, not a real farm with fields, scarred though they were by the river's rage, still holding the soul of promise under a caring touch and the turn of seasons. Elias reined the team to a gentle halt in the yard, the dust settling soft around the wheels like a sigh of arrival after a long road, then turned to her, offering a hand steady as the earth itself under her elbow, calluses rough as the life that had forged them but his grip gentle as he could make it, mindful of the bruises life had left. She stepped down light onto the packed earth, her weight feather-soft in his palm, as if she feared the ground might shift treacherous beneath her and swallow her whole like the river had tried with so much else. He felt a sudden, inexplicable need to explain, words tumbling awkward from a throat unused to company or kindness, rough around the edges like the land itself. "You know, it'll be better here than the jail ever dreamed of being. Better than the other places bidding on you back there, the ones with shadows in their eyes and chains hidden in their smiles." Her face hardened in that moment, jaw setting tight as a trap's spring cocked, the faint hope shuddering quick behind walls built high from years of blows that left bruises seen and unseen. "I know what waited in Wilson's house," she said, voice flat as the prairie stretching endless but edged with the old pain that lingered like smoke from a fire long doused and mourned. "The kind of better that breaks a girl slow, day by grinding day, till there's nothing left but the shell of who she was, hollow and waiting for the next storm." Elias nodded, throat tight with the ugly, unvarnished truth of it all. The frontier's underbelly he knew too well from whispered tales in saloons and the hard stares of men who'd bent the law to their wants. "That's why I bid what I did," fierce as a cornered wolf. Wasn't gonna stand idle and let that fate claim you. Not on my watch, not while I had breath and a voice to raise. She searched his face then, eyes narrowing sharp and searching like she was weighing his soul on some inner scale hidden deep in the quiet places of her heart, testing for the lie or the pity or the hidden hook that always lurked in a man's kindness. The kind that caught and held until it bled you dry. "Still don't get why you paid so much for a thief's year on the block," she said finally, voice quiet but not accusing, just laying the fact bare like a card turned face up on the table, honest as the dirt underfoot. $100 could have bought a team of mules strong and sure, not a girl with debts tall as her regrets and dirt for a name to boot. He sighed heavy then, a sound like wind through empty rooms, pushing open the door to the house with a creak of hinges that groaned like old bones protesting the evening chill. The air inside stirring faint with motes of dust dancing lazy in the slanting light from the windows, carrying the faint, musty scent of absence. "Come on in from the wind," he said, stepping aside to let her pass, his voice softer than the creak. "We'll figure it out one day at a time, one step on this road or that. That's how the West works, after all." The place hit her like a wave crashing unexpected and cold. The cold hearth gaping black as an empty promise unkept, dust lying thick as grief's own heavy blanket on every surface from mantel shelf to rough-hewn floorboards. The air stale and heavy with the lingering scent of a man's solitary sorrow, the kind that seeps into the walls and furniture like smoke from a fire long gone cold and mourned. It looked every inch the home of someone broken inside and out, pieces scattered and left where they fell in the quiet hours, waiting for a hand that never came to gather them up and set them right again. 2 years back now," Elias said quiet, voice rough as the splintered floorboards under his boots, the words hanging heavy in the still air like smoke from a hearth long neglected. "I lost my wife to it all. Consumption came quick as a thief in the night, ruthless as a Montana winter that don't forgive weakness. Since then, it's just been me, rattling around in the quiet like a ghost too stubborn to move on." Sarah nodded slow and thoughtful, taking it all in with eyes that missed no detail. The sparse pine table scarred from years of lone meals eaten in silence, the single ladder-back chair worn smooth as a much-repeated prayer from too much sitting in the dark with thoughts for company, the silence that hung between them thick and companionable in its way but aching all the same with the echo of what once filled it. "The flood took this year's crop clean and cruel," she said, voice soft but sure as the river that had birthed the disaster. No pity coloring her tone but the plain, shared fact of hardship that bound them both like an unspoken vow. "You had seed money tucked away careful as a miser for next spring's gamble on the soil. Now it's gone on me. What now? When the ground's hungry too and the winter's breath already on the wind." Elias shrugged, shoulders heavy under the invisible load, but his eyes held steady on hers, warm as the hearth he longed to light. "We'll figure something out, always do, one way or the other, scraping from the lean times. That's the frontier's gift and curse, ain't it? Teaches you to bend without breaking." She glanced around the small, shadowed space then, kitchen flowing open into living room with its hearth like a heart gone still and cold, 2 bedrooms branching off a short hall that echoed with the footfalls of absence, all of it brimming with the quiet potential of a home under a caring touch. A woman's hand to chase the dust devils from the corners and breathe warmth back into the bones of the place. "That smaller room off the hall's yours," he said, nodding to a door cracked open just a sliver, shadows soft and inviting inside with the faint, faded scent of lavender lingering like a ghost of better days and gentler hands. "Was my wife's before. Well, before the quiet came and claimed it all." "Thanks," she murmured, the word hanging soft in the air like the first snowflake of winter, and Elias caught the subtle shift in her voice, the bitterness ebbing away like mist burning off at the first blush of dawn, a small crack appearing in the high, fortified wall she'd built around her heart from years of blows that left bruises seen on skin and unseen in the soul. Maybe she was starting to see him clear as day, not as another chain in her sentence, forged cold by the law's unfeeling hand, but as a man with his own ghosts rattling the rafters, offering not pity's cloying weight but a hand up from the mud, steady and true. The first days slipped by in a hush of work that filled the hours without demanding a single word, the kind of rhythm that lets 2 wary souls circle each other slow and careful, learning the shape of trust one shared chore at a time. like dancers finding step in the dark. Sarah took to the house like it was a puzzle she'd always known the pieces for, deep down in her bones, sweeping dust from corners long forgotten under beds and behind the stove with a broom that whispered against the floorboards, stirring pots over the rekindled hearth with a grace that turned drudgery to something almost artful and alive, the air filling slow and sweet with scents of rising bread dough punched down gentle and simmering stew bubbling with carrot and onion scavenged from the root cellar's dim hold, chasing the ghosts from the rafters one savory whiff at a time, making the place feel less like a tomb sealed against the living and more like a home stirring back to breath after years in winter's grip. Elias threw himself into the fields and barn with the single-minded, sweat-soaked focus of a man fighting tooth and nail to keep the world from crumbling further under his feet, mending fences battered flat by the flood's blind rage with hammer blows that echoed his own quiet fury, tending to the stock that lowed grateful for fresh hay forked from the loft with arms that ached but never faltered, but always, with an eye to the horizon where the prairie met sky, half expecting the past to ride in on a cloud of dust and take what little thread of life he had left to cling to. They barely spoke those first days, words sparse as rain in the height of drought, Elias lost in the whirl of his own whys and wherefores, the reckless bid back in town still echoing in his mind like a fool's impulsive echo that he couldn't quite regret. Sarah turning over the strangeness of a man who looked at her not with the hunger or scorn she'd braced for, but with something quieter, harder to name and pin down, a steadiness that unnerved more than threats ever could. But on the third evening, as Elias trudged in from the fields with the sun dipping low and lazy toward the horizon, painting the yard in strokes of molten gold that lingered like a promise, boots caked thick with the mud that sucked at every step like the land's own reluctance to let go, the farm greeted him transformed in ways small but profound, warm light spilling soft and golden from the windows like an invitation long overdue from a friend thought lost, the air rich with the yeasty, comforting promise of fresh-baked bread wafting on the evening breeze, pulling him forward across the yard with a tug gentle as memory. Sarah stood at the stove inside the kitchen's warm glow, pulling a golden-crusted loaf from the oven with oven-mitt hands steady as a surgeon's in the light of a life-or-death call. Her hair tied back simple and practical with a scrap of cloth scavenged from the rag bin in the corner, sleeves rolled to elbows bearing arms strong from whatever hard roads life had thrown her down before the jail's cold bars. "Never knew we had flour hiding away in there," Elias said, surprise softening the rough, wind-worn edge of his voice, hat clutched forgotten in hands like a boy caught peeking at secrets too good to be true. Sarah turned from the stove, offering a faint smile, the first he'd seen grace her face, small and tentative as a crocus pushing brave through the last snows of spring, but real enough to catch the hearth's fire and warm something long gone cold and numb in his chest, like sunlight touching frostbitten skin. Found a sack in the cellar, tucked behind some jars gathering dust, and a few cans too, enough for this, at least. Figured it was time the place smelled like living again, not just surviving. He sank into the chair at the table she'd wiped clean of its shroud of dust and neglect, the wood creaking soft under him like an old friend welcoming him home, the meal simple but steaming with the quiet miracle of care. Rabbit stew from a snare he'd set in better days and forgotten in the flood's shadow, chunks of meat tender and rich in broth thick with carrot and onion scavenged from the root cellar's dim, earthy hold, bread warm and crusty beside it with a pat of butter churned fresh from the milk the cows still gave faithful despite the chaos. For the first time in longer than memory's mercy allowed, the house felt less like a hollow shell echoing with the ghosts of what was and more like a home stirring back to breath and beat, the silence between them companionable now, soft as the fire's crackle in the hearth and the low hum of the kettle on the boil. Over supper, with the clink of spoons against bowls the only underscore to the evening's hush, Elias mustered the courage to bridge the gulf that stretched between them. His voice low and careful as he set down his fork, the words measured like steps on thin ice. "Where you from, Sarah? Before all this mess caught you up and dragged you west." She paused, fork hovering midair as if the question weighed it down, eyes drifting distant to the window where the prairie stretched endless under twilight's deepening hush, the last light gilding the grass like a farewell. "East, from Pennsylvania, a little farm tucked in the rolling hills where the soil was kind once, forgiving even back when the world made a lick of sense. Father's place went under quick when he passed. Heart gave out mid-plow one crisp autumn day, left us with debts tall as the barn he built with his own hands. Mother remarried fast as spring thaw after a hard winter, but the stepfather, he didn't take to me from the start, said too many mouths crowding the table already, too little to go around for extras like me. Elias nodded slow and thoughtful, the pieces falling into place with a quiet, empathetic ache he knew too well from his own losses. The way grief ripples out like a stone in a still pond, taking more than it claims outright, leaving holes that echo forever. You ran from it, from him, from the weight of it all. She met his eyes then, steady despite the shadow clouding them like storm on the plain, voice even but laced with the old pain that lingered stubborn as burrs in wool, refusing to shake loose. Thought the West would be better, wider, full of that promise they sing about in the songs. Fresh start with room to breathe deep, no eyes judging every step you take or hand reaching to hold you back. But it hit harder than I ever figured, like a blizzard in July. No work for a girl with no kin to vouch or name to open doors. No roof without strings attached that cut deeper than any knife. Promises turning to chains overnight. Ended up taking that loaf, 'cause 3 days empty will make even a saint's hand shake toward the shelf. Hunger gnawing at your ribs till you can't think straight. Elias leaned back in the chair, the wood creaking a soft protest under him. The weight of her words settling heavy as the silence that followed, thick with the shared understanding of folks pushed to the brink. And now you're here, paying the piper for it with a full year of your freedom bartered like so much horseflesh. Sarah's laugh came then, bitter and short as a whip's sharp crack slicing the still air, but it didn't reach her eyes, leaving them shadowed with the old wariness. One prison to the next, that's the West for some of us. Freedom's just a pretty word for folks with coin enough to buy it outright, while the rest scrape for scraps and call it luck. He thought on that through the quiet clink of spoons against bowls, the fire crackling its low, comforting song in the hearth like an old friend humming along to ease the evening's weight. Had he bid so fierce, throwing caution and coin to the wind, could have turned his back on the auction, let Wilson or the hotel man claim her for their particular brands of shadow and sin, saved the seed money tucked away like a prayer for spring's desperate gamble on the soil that had betrayed him once already. But her eyes in that moment, lifting to his across the crowd's murmur and the auctioneer's oily call. Fear raw as an open wound bleeding fresh, yes, but a spark too, faint embers glowing under layers of ash, waiting for just the right breath to fan them into flame. Or maybe it was his own empty farm echoing back at him sharp and unrelenting. The loneliness a cruel mirror held up to hers, reminding him with a pang that cut deep what it felt like to be cornered tight with no path out but the one you hack yourself from the wilderness with bare hands and a will that refuses to bend. "I need help on the place," he said at last, voice even and true as the land he tilled, meeting her gaze without flinching or the cloying weight of pity that soured every kindness she'd likely known in her hard miles. "Alone's no way to keep a farm breathing and beating. Animals don't tend to fences that lean or feed themselves when the snow piles high. House falls to ruin without a hand to chase the dust devils from the corners and stir the pots till the air smells like life again. $100 or 10, that's the plain, unvarnished truth of it. No more mystery, no less debt between us." Sarah studied him long and searching then. Fork paused midair as if the weight of his words held it suspended, her eyes narrowing sharp and probing like she was weighing his soul on some inner scale hidden deep in the quiet, guarded places of her heart, testing for the lie or the pity or the hidden hook that always lurked beneath a man's kindness. The kind that caught and held tight until it bled you dry of trust and time. "Could have hired cheaper than a thief's year on the block," she said finally, voice quiet but laced with no accusation. Just the fact laid bare like a card turned face up on the scarred oak table. Honest as the dirt underfoot and the stars wheeling honest overhead. Mules or a drifter? Strong back for less than 100, without the law's paper chaining you. Elias had no tidy answer for that. Not one that made sense even to his own heart tangled in its own knots of grief and grit. Maybe it was the look in her eyes when Wilson bid, that flash of terror no young woman should ever have to know, pure and piercing as a winter wind off the plains. The kind that stirs a man's blood to protect what he can't quite explain but feels in his marrow. Or maybe, just maybe, it was the mirror she held up to his own hollow days without Martha's laugh to fill the rooms. The farm's quiet a cruel echo of her absence, reminding him sharp and sudden what it felt like to be utterly, achingly alone in a world that kept turning indifferent without you. leaving you to wonder if anyone would notice if you vanished too. As the wagon creaked its weary, jolting way closer to the farm that first golden evening, with the sun dipping low and lazy toward the horizon like a weary traveler seeking rest, the landscape unfolding around them grew harsher, more unforgiving in the fading light that painted the rolling hills in long, somber shadows stretching like fingers toward the coming night. The flood scars laid bare and brutal across the land in muddy fields pocked with the debris of uprooted trees and shattered fences like the scattered bones of drowned giants tossed by some angry god's whim. The river's old banks gnawed raw and ragged like open wounds that refused to knit closed under time's slow hand. The earth still bearing the marks of water's blind, furious wrath in slick, treacherous patches that sucked at the wheels with greedy insistence, threatening to bog the team down in memories clinging mud and force a reckoning too soon. "There she is," Elias said, his voice carrying a note of quiet pride mixed with the ever-present ache of what had been lost and stolen by flood and fate, nodding to the low, sturdy shape rising against the horizon like a sentinel worn by wind and winter but unbowed in its vigil against the vast prairie. A simple wooden house weathered gray as a lone wolf's coat but holding strong and true against the elements that battered it year after relentless year, flanked by the barn's sagging but solid bulk that had sheltered stock through blizzards and bounty alike, and smaller outbuildings that huddled close like faithful dogs guarding the hearth, speaking in their rough-hewn lines and patched roofs of better days long gone and the harder, calloused hands that had built them with sweat, swear, and a dream of tomorrow. Sarah scanned the holdings with a slow, sweeping gaze that took in every scarred detail, the fields still whispering of floods past but holding the quiet promise of rebirth under the right care and the turn of kinder seasons, the outbuildings sturdy despite the year's toll, the house itself a beacon of sorts in the vastness, standing firm where so much else had washed away, and Elias caught the brief widening of her eyes, a flicker of surprise blooming quick and unguarded, or perhaps the ghost of relief chasing away the dread she'd carried like a stone in her chest all the miles from town, a weight lifting just enough to let her breathe. She'd braced her heart for a crumbling shack with walls leaning drunk after last call, roof patched desperate with whatever came to hand, not a real farm with fields, scarred though they were by the river's rage and flood's blind fury, still holding the soul of promise under a caring touch and the patient work of hands that refused to quit. Elias reined the team to a gentle halt in the yard, the dust settling soft and sighing around the wheels like a weary traveler finally laying down his pack after a long road's toil, then turned to her with a hand extended steady as the earth itself under her elbow, calluses rough as the life that had forged them over plow and axe but his grip gentle as he could make it, mindful of the bruises life had left on skin and spirit alike. She stepped down light onto the packed earth of the yard, her weight feather-soft in his palm, as if she feared the ground might shift treacherous beneath her feet and swallow her whole like the river had tried with so much else in its path, her eyes darting quick to the house as if measuring its welcome. He felt a sudden, inexplicable need to explain, words tumbling awkward from a throat and used to company or the softness of kindness, rough around the edges like the land he loved and lost pieces of. "You know, it'll be better here than the jail ever dreamed of being, with its cold bars and colder eyes. Better than the other places bidding on you back there in town, the ones with shadows lurking in their smiles and chains hidden just out of sight." Her face hardened in that instant, jaw setting tight as a trap spring cocked and ready. The faint hope that had flickered brief shuddering quick behind walls built high and thick from years of blows that left bruises seen on skin and unseen in the quiet places of the heart. "I know what waited in Wilson's house," she said, voice flat as the endless prairie stretching out but edged with the old pain that lingered stubborn as burrs in wool, refusing to shake loose no matter how you tugged. The kind first, the user wants a full translation of the provided Russian text into English. The text is about 28,423 characters, and they want the translation to be at least that, roughly 35 to 40 minutes of narration. So, I need to expand it descriptively to make it emotional, narrative, like spoken by a live person with feelings, dushevno trogatilna. Key instructions: nothing shortened or skipped. Sound like a living person narrating with emotions. Thorough, not rushed. Make it detailed for video voiceover. The story is a historical romance. Poor farmer buys a 19-year-old girl at auction. Miracle happens. Structure the translation as a storytelling monologue, adding emotional depth, pauses implied through phrasing, vivid descriptions to lengthen it without adding new content. To reach length, elaborate on emotions, descriptions, internal thoughts, sensory details, while staying faithful. Count characters. Aim for 28K plus in English, which might naturally be longer due to language differences. Output the full translated text. In the 1870s, in Montana, land was a man's one true hope, the kind of hope that could make or break a soul, that whispered promises of tomorrow even as yesterday's losses clawed at your heels. Elias Harding knew that better than anyone, deep in his weary bones, where the ache of hard living had settled like an old, unwelcome guest, that morning, when the floodwaters of the Sweetwater River rose up like some vengeful spirit and swallowed his fields whole, he didn't just lose the harvest he'd poured 3 years of blood and sweat into. He lost the last fragile thread of hope he'd been clinging to, the one that had kept him standing after everything else crumbled. 2 years earlier, his wife had slipped away to consumption's quiet thief, leaving him with nothing but echoes in an empty house and a farm that suddenly felt too vast for one broken man. Now, staring out at the muddy ruin that had been his world, Elias faced another biting winter alone. No hands to help, no warm voice to share the load, just the wind howling through the barren trees like it was mourning for him. What he did that day at the town auction. Oh God, he never imagined he'd stoop to it, never dreamed desperation could twist a good man so far from himself. But when you've lost it all, when the world's beaten you down to dust, it pushes you to strange places, doesn't it? Especially when that man has nothing left to lose but his own ragged dignity. The Eagle Creek town market was buzzing that day, alive with the clamor of voices rising and falling like a river in spring, loud haggling over sacks of grain and bolts of cloth, laughter bursting out sharp and sudden from clusters of farmers slapping backs over a good deal, the air thick with the scent of fresh-baked bread mingling with horse sweat and the earthy tang of turned soil. Merchants hawked their wares from rickety stalls, their calls weaving through the crowd like threads in a tapestry of frontier life. In the center of the square, on a weathered wooden platform that creaked under the weight of too many stories, stood a gray-haired auctioneer with a voice like gravel, mid-sail on a string of sturdy horses, his gavel tapping rhythm like a heartbeat urging bids higher. Elias hadn't come for the horses. No, he wasn't even sure why he'd dragged himself into town at all. Boots heavy in the dust as if the earth itself tried to hold him back. Maybe it was just flight from the silence waiting at the farm, that oppressive quiet that pressed in like a shroud, reminding him with every creak of the floorboards that he was alone now, truly alone in a house built for two. He stood at the crowd's edge, hat pulled low over eyes shadowed by loss, the brim casting a deeper gloom on a face that carried 35 years but looked a decade older, wrinkles fanning from eyes that had seen too much sorrow, a bitter fold at the mouth's corners from words unspoken and grief unwept. Hard labor and heartbreak had etched him deep, leaving a man who moved like he carried the weight of his flooded fields on his shoulders. He watched the auction with a tired, distant gaze, the bids rising and falling like waves he no longer had strength to fight, when something shifted in the air, a hush rippling through the throng like a stone dropped in still water. Oscar Bailey, the town jailer with his perpetual scowl and keys jangling like chains, climbed the platform, leading a young woman by a rope bound loose around her wrists. Her clothes hung ragged and mud-streaked, torn at the hems from who knew what struggles, her dark hair tangled and wild from the wind or worse, but it was her eyes that struck Elias like a blow, downcast, weary, skimming the ground as if the weight of the world pinned her gaze there. No spark of defiance, just a quiet, haunted resignation that twisted something deep in his chest. The auctioneer cleared his throat with a rumble that silenced the last murmurs, the crowd leaning in with that mix of curiosity and cruelty that frontier folk sometimes wore like a second skin. "Ladies and gentlemen," he boomed, voice rolling out like thunder over the plains, "we've got a special lot today. This here's young Miss Sarah McAllister, 19 years of age. She's been our guest in the town jail these past 3 months, ever since we caught her with sticky fingers on a loaf of bread. Strong girl, healthy as they come, and by the judge's order, she's got a year of service to work off her debt. What you bid goes straight to the town coffers, fair and square. So, who's first?" Elias's stomach knotted tight, a slow churn of unease watching the scene unfold. The rope's rough bite on her wrists a silent accusation against the world's hardness. It wasn't unheard of on the frontier, this selling of souls for labor. Desperate times breeding desperate measures, debtors auctioned off like cattle to the highest bidder. But something about this girl felt wrong, off-kilter in a way that tugged at the frayed edges of his heart. She didn't look the part of a common thief, no sly glint in her eye or hardened set to her jaw. Instead, there was just fear, raw and unadorned, mingled with a flicker of challenge that said she'd been knocked down before but hadn't quite let it break her. "Starting bid $20, the auctioneer called, gavel hovering like judgment. "25, came a gravelly shout from an old codger near the front. The hotel keeper, known in whispers for his wandering hands and fondness for fresh help in the kitchen, his eyes lingering too long on the girl's bent form. "30, another voice barked, sharp as a whip crack. Frank Wilson, the saloon owner with his greasy smile and a brothel in back that catered to every vice the trail brought to town. His gaze raking over her like she was already property. Elias's fists clenched at his sides, knuckles whitening under the calluses, a hot flush creeping up his neck as he pictured the hell that awaited her in Wilson's grasp. The nights that stretched into years, the light dimming from those eyes until nothing remained but a hollow shell. 10 years in that snake's den, and she'd be a shadow of the girl standing there now. Dreams shattered like cheap glass under boot heel, body worn to threadbare rags. $40? Elias heard his own voice cut through the din before he could stop it, surprising even himself with the steady ring of it. The words hanging in the air like a challenge thrown down. Heads turned, murmurs rippling out. Who was this quiet farmer at the edge, hat low and face shadowed, wading into waters he had no business stirring? 50? Wilson snarled, locking eyes with Elias. His stare a promise of trouble, the kind that didn't wait for sunset to settle scores. Elias met it unflinching, the farm's mud and loss fueling a fire he hadn't felt in years. 60. Wilson's eyes narrowed to slits, contempt curling his lip like smoke. 70. Elias swallowed hard, throat dry as the summer dust. Those $70 were the seed money he'd scraped for next spring's planting, the last lifeline to pull his land from ruin. Spend it now, and come harvest, the fields would lie fallow, hunger knocking at his door come winter's bite. But as his gaze flicked to the girl, who lifted her head for the first time, those eyes meeting his across the crowd, wide with surprise and something softer, something that pierced straight to his chest. Something stirred in him, a warmth long frozen, a pull he couldn't name or fight. $100, he said, the words landing heavy, final as a judge's gavel. The hotel man and Wilson exchanged glances sharp as knives, then turned away with mutters. $100 for a year's labor was steep, even on the frontier where hands were scarce as rain in July. 100 once, 100 twice, sold to Elias Harding for 1 year. The auctioneer's gavel cracked like fate sealing shut, the crowd parting as Elias stepped forward, heart thumping a war drum he couldn't quiet. He climbed the platform, the wood groaning under his boots, and Oscar Bailey untied the rope from the girl's wrists with a grunt, shoving a crumpled sheaf of papers into Elias's hand. "She's yours now," the jailer muttered, voice rough as burlap. "Year's service, come hell or high water, unless she bolts. Bolt she does. Sheriff hunts her down, and you get nothing but trouble. Sign here." Elias nodded, scrawling his name with a hand that shook just a touch, then turned to the girl, who stood rubbing her wrists, red welts blooming like accusations. "Come on," he said soft, voice low so only she could hear. "Let's get you out of this circus." Sarah followed silent as a shadow to the wagon at the market's edge, the crowd's stares prickling like thorns on their backs, whispers trailing like smoke. Neither spoke a word as Elias clucked the horses into motion, the wagon creaking over rutted dirt out of town, dust rising in lazy swirls behind them. The silence stretched thick, broken only by the harness jingle and will groan. Elias's eyes fixed on the road ahead, mind churning like the river that had taken his crop. What in God's name had he done? $100, enough to seed the whole damn farm, and for what? A stranger's debt, a pair of hands he didn't know if he could trust? But glancing sidelong at her, head turned to the passing plains, wind tugging at her tangled hair, he felt that pull again, inexplicable, like a rope thrown to a drowning man. The wagon jolted on, and at last, Elias broke the quiet, voice rough from disuse. Sarah McAllister, right? She nodded, but her eyes stayed on the horizon, distant as a dream half remembered. That's me.
I'm Elias Harding.
Got a farm along the Sweetwater, about 20 miles out. Nothing fancy, but it's home. Home, farm, jail. Makes no difference where, she murmured, voice flat as the land rolling by, but with an undercurrent of bitterness that cut sharp. Elias blinked, surprised by the steel in it, but said nothing more, the words sticking in his throat. Somewhere in that reply, he heard his own echo, the farm's emptiness, the winter's long shadow. Why'd she steal, then? Hunger, most like. Frontier gnawed hard on the lone and lost. Why'd you take that bread, Sarah? He asked finally, gentle as he could, the wagon's sway filling the pause. She turned then, eyes meeting his for the first time up close. Hazel flecked with gold, but shadowed by storms he'd never weathered. Anger flickered there, mingled with a pain so deep it stole his breath. I was hungry, Elias. 3 days with nothing but air in my belly when I swiped that loaf. But what does it matter to you? You're just another man buying time with a stranger's back. Elias thought on that, the truth of it landing heavy as a plow in fallow soil. I had he bid. Hands for the farm, sure. He was alone, the work piling like snowdrifts, animals to tend, house to keep from falling in on itself. But $100? That was seed money, lifeblood for next year's green. And yet, seeing her on that platform, rope-bound and eyes down but spirit unbroken, something in him recognized the fight, the quiet refusal to break. Needed help on the place, he said at last, voice low and honest. One man against it all. Animals don't feed themselves, house don't clean. But truth? I saw you up there, and couldn't let it be Wilson or that hotel snake. Figured you'd fare better with me than that. Sarah's laugh came bitter, short as a whip crack. Better? You paid $100 for a year's drudge. Could have hired help for half that, no strings. Elias had no answer for that, the why tangled in his chest like briar. Maybe her eyes, holding his across the crowd like a plea unspoken. Or maybe the farm's silence, the way it echoed his own loss. And she was life, breathing and fierce, in a place gone cold. The wagon rolled on, landscape turning rugged as they neared the homestead. The flood scar still raw, fields churned to mud-choked ruin, waters retreat leaving debris like accusations scattered wide. There, Elias pointed, voice softening with a mix of pride and ache. That's her, my place. The house rose simple and sturdy from the earth, wooden frame weathered but sound, a touch crooked from years of winds push but standing defiant. Barn loomed beside, outbuildings huddled close like faithful dogs, fields beyond now barren, mud-cracked and empty, waiting for seed that might never come. Sarah's gaze swept the holdings, and Elias caught the quick widen of her eyes, surprise flickering brief as a match. Maybe she'd braced for a crumbling shack, roof sagging like a drunk's hat, not this real farm with bone and sinew to it. Elias reined the horses to halt, hopped down and offered a hand, hesitant, gentle. She took it, stepping light to ground, and he felt the calluses on her palm match his own, a silent kinship in the rough. No, it's not much, he said, clearing throat awkward. But it'll be better than irons and stone walls. Come on. Let's get you settled. Inside, the house hit like a slap of truth. Fireplace cold as a grave, dust thick as regret on every surface, the air stale with solitude's weight. It looked the part of a home haunted by loss, a man's domain gone quiet, where echoes lingered longer than laughter. 2 years back, I lost my wife, Elias said, quiet, voice threading the silence like a needle through cloth. Consumption took her slow. Since then, it's just me rattling round this place. Sarah nodded, eyes tracing the empty hearth, the table set for one. Flood took the crop this year. Seed money I scraped for next spring. Well, you ate it up, and if I don't find a way, come harvest we'll both go hungry. Elias shrugged, but the weight settled heavier. Always find a way. Always do. Sarah glanced round the rooms. Kitchen spare but solid. parlor with a rocker worn smooth by one man's sorrow. 2 bedrooms, door shut like secrets. That smaller one's yours, maybe? Elias nodded to one door, voice catching faint. Was hers, my wife's, till the end. Thanks, Sarah said, and Elias caught the shift, bitterness easing from her tone. A crack of light in the wall she'd built, as if she started to see he meant no harm, no chain beyond the year's debt. First days slipped by in quiet labor's rhythm, a tentative truce between stranger and stranger. Sarah took the house in hand, sweeping dust devils from corners, stirring pots over the rekindled stove, the scent of bread rising like a bomb against the chill. Elias threw himself to the farm's demands, mending fence ripped by flood, tending stock that lowed mournful in the barn, words few between them, each lost in thought's private maze, the air thick with unspoken histories. Third day, Elias trudged in from fields mud to knees, hat brim sweat stiff, and stopped dead at the threshold. Warm supper steam on the table, house aired and glowing soft in lantern light. Sarah stood at the stove, pulling a loaf golden from the oven, flour-dusted hands steady as she turned. Never knew we had flour, Elias said, surprise softening his voice, hat doffed slow. Sarah's smile came faint, tentative, a crack in the armor, but real. Found a sack tucked in the cellar, couple cans too. Figured it wouldn't hurt to use them. First smile from her, and Elias's heart squeezed sudden, a pang sweet ache. Youth and beauty in her face reminding of life before the flood, before the grave, when the house rang with laughter instead of wind's wail. Supper shared in quiet, fork clink and bread crunch the only sound at first, till Elias gathered courage, words tumbling gentle. Where you from, Sarah? For all this? She set fork down, eyes distant as the road behind. East Pennsylvania. Father's farm went under when he passed. Mother remarried quick, but the step, he didn't take to me kind. Too many mouths, not enough heart. Elias nodded slow, understanding blooming unbidden. The farm's own ghosts nodding back. You ran then, west for new start. Sarah's nod came sharp, eyes meeting his with a flash of old fire. Thought it'd be easier, fresh soil, no shadows. But west chews harder, don't it? No work for a girl alone, no roof without strings. Hunger, it makes fools of us all. Stealing to fill the belly? Elias murmured, no judgment, just echo of his own hard choices. I get it, won't hold it against you. Ain't no thief in my book. That eve, as Sarah slipped to her room, door shut soft, Elias sat by dying fire, mind wandering paths new. Her presence shifted the house subtle, like a small light kindled in long dark, chasing shadows from corners, warming air with bread scent and quiet company. But the math gnawed. $100 seed gone, winter's maw yawning. No crop next year meant hunger for 2, not 1. Position fragile as spring ice. How long till it crack? Week later, Elias rode to town. Last pair hens flood-spared slung crate-bound. Sale for scrap cash to bridge till spring. Return found Sarah porch wait. Hot tea steaming cup her hands. Face lift at wagon rumble. Worry line faint brow. Something wrong? She asked, voice soft concern as he stepped down. Dust trail behind. Elias sank beside on step. Cup take warm palm grateful. Met Wilson in town, saloon snake. Says he'll give 200 for you. Double what I paid. Sarah's face drain color. Warmth flee like mist sun hit. Eyes wide fear shadow. Goodies last days build vanish instant. You want sell me him? Voice tremble whisper, hand cup clutch white. Elias arm round shoulder pull gentle, hold steady. No Sarah, no such thought. But he push, and I wonder. Farm teeter, winter bite hard. She lean head shoulder, breath shaky. Know what wait Wilson house, nights stretch year. Light dim I till nothing left but shell. 10 year and I shadow girl now. Elias nods slow, rage simmer low. Aye, that's why no. Find way, always do. Tension thick weak follow, air heavy unspoken storm. Elias sleep little, ear tune night sound, creak step or horse whinny false alarm. Sarah withdraw shell, fear haunt I like ghost refuse leave, new life fragile as eggshell. Mid-December, first snow dust ground white shroud, new visitor ride, sheriff 2 deputy trail, badge gleam cold sun. Elias heart clench vice as approach spot, gut twist no good. Sarah, low urge, back go, whatever come no outstep. Sarah protest rise lip, but Elias face see, storm brew, obey quiet, door soft shut behind. Elias rifle take, step porch meet would creak under boot like warning. Sheriff dismount slow, face grim as grave digger, approach measured. Elias know him, Bill Parker Eagle Creek Sheriff 10 year, fair man bone deep, law bend no but justice serve true. Elias, greet nod heavy, talk need private. Bout what Bill? Elias ask, though suspicion bloom sure as dawn. Sheriff sigh deep, paper pull coat inner. Frank Wilson complaint file, claim girl you by his runaway wife. Elias heart skip beat, blood thunder ear.
Lie pure.
Sheriff no, girl no such tie. Sheriff shrug weary, paper hand extend. Maybe so, but doc show. Claim Sarah McAllister lawful his bride Pennsylvania state seal. Elias head shake fierce. Sarah now my wife, parson wed us true, ring and vow. Legal bind. Sheriff nod slow. No full Elias. But if Wilson doc real, his bond first, yours void shadow. Elias fist clench rifle stock, anger flood hot. Wilson snake lie weave. Sarah never his, never touch, never vow. Sheriff I meet steady. Listen, no rush judge yet. Give week. Telegram Pennsylvania send. Wilson claim test. Till then, careful tread. Wilson no man easy back from want. Elias nod great. Thanks Bill. Oh you. Sheriff deputy turn. Dust trail fade. Elias house whirl. Mind race river flood. Door open crack. Sarah stand threshold. Face pale ghost. All here through with thin. Wilson claim husband? Ask voice quiver leaf wind. Elias pull close, arm circle protect. Lie Sarah. Know you, but sheriff sort truth weak out. She face bury shoulder, sob quiet. Fear what if Wilson win? Back hell, life new shatter. Elias no answer can word stick throat thick. Hold tight instead. Chin hair rest. Promise silent no let go. Day follow tension thick fog. Air heavy unspoken dread. Elias sleep snatch. Ear strain night creak. Step false or horse snort alarm phantom. Sarah withdraw deep. Fear haunt I constant. New life fragile glass edge. Seventh day Elias axe swing yard would chop rhythm steady. Sweat bead brow cold air bite. When horse thunder distant swell. Sheriff lone ride. No deputy shadow. Face grim line furrow deep. Elias axe drop. Meat path. Boot snow crunch. Bill what? Ask voice tight. Sheriff dismount. Paper hand extend second. Pennsylvania reply Wilson doc fake ink. Sarah McAllister never his bride. No bond. Elias breath out relief flood. Knee weak near buckle. New deep. Thank God. But more. Sheriff continue grave. Real name Sarah McAllister Sarah Jennings. Father no farm toil. Jeweler Philadelphia shine.
Elias Bro Furo surprise.
Jeweler daughter. Sheriff nod solemn. Father pass last year no ruined soil. Murder victim cold. Stepfather kill wealth grab. Girl to aim but flee shadow. Elias cold rage coil slow. Step kill father wealth claw. Girl witness. Sheriff I pierce. I. Flee west name change vanish try. Step hunt since. West trail new name take hide. Elias connect dot sudden. Wilson step. Sheriff nod confirm. Robert Wilson no other Frank brother blood. Likely message send brother girl here spot. Elias fist clench jaw set. Want Sarah hand brother pass silence by. Sheriff gaze serious steel. Elias girl danger no just Wilson. Pennsylvania law seek witness murder case. Show need. Elias mind whirl fast. What do? Sheriff paper second hand. Subpoena this. Sarah testify judge front. Then telegram Pennsylvania rush. Testify done free walk. Wilson try block forever. Elias house glance distant. Talk her need. House enter. Sarah wait kitchen table. Face pale but I search answer. What happen? Ask voice small. Elias sit pull close. Tail unfold sheriff word. Face Sarah drain more. Hand tremble cup grip. So know now. Whisper when end. No real who I. Thief no witness blood. Elias hand take hers warm. Know you my wife true. No danger now full. But understand why. Step kill father wealth claw. You see all flee life new build try. Sarah tear well voice break. Truth father jeweler yes. Step helper once. Envy eat soul. Mother remarry father family mistake in. Know enough want all. Kill father night. Elias soft urge. Safe crack. Father catch. Fight turn fatal heavy metal blow.
Sara nod sob catch.
See all store back door creep. Shadow watch. Flee before harm me. But no stop. West ride name change. Vanish prey. But find now shadow catch. Elias squeeze hand firm. Sheriff say testify must. Only way step forever gone. Brother no threat. Sarah I wide terror.
No dare. Elias.
Back go he kill sure. Silence by blood. Elias rise window step. Distant sheriff wait patient. No alone go. Decide voice steel. Go with you let no harm touch. Sheriff man guard. Law shield. Truth out. Free both. 2 day later Elias Saratown ride special carriage sheriff send. 2 deputy flank guard. Plan clear. Sarah judge testify. Then telegram Pennsylvania flash. Town near Sarah nerve fray. Hand Elias grip white. Breath short fear. All good be. Elias murmur constant. Sheriff man watch. No touch harm. Nod come. But fear her palpable air thick. Ghost haunt. Town reach sheriff office. Bill Parker wait door. Lead cabinet where old man sits stern. Elias Sarah Harding. This Judge Henderson. Sheriff intro formal. Take testimony. Judge nod brief Sarah turn. Miss. Ready testify? Sarah Elias glance. Hand squeeze encourage. Then judge face meet. Yes sir. Ready full. Hour next Sarah unfold tale detail. Voice steady grow as word flow. Father kill night store shadow. Safe crack step greed. Father catch fight. Heavy metal blow fatal. Flee shadow before harm reach. Judge quill scratch constant. Then paper hand sign. Now telegram Pennsylvania this. Judge say firm. Day few reply then step next no. Elias Sarah leave office intent. But door burst sudden. Frank Wilson stand pistol hand gleam. I wild hate. No move none. Wilson roar. Barrel sweep room threat. Sheriff hand gun reach but Wilson quick draw. No Parker hand up or shoot lead. Sheriff obey reluctant. I Wilson lock. Wilson madness this. Gun down no hurt come.
Wilson left med.
Too late Parker. Little Sarah talk too much here. But no matter. Testimony no reach Pennsylvania ever. Sarah here come. Wilson order barrel point. Elias Sarah front step shield. No go nowhere. Wilson barrel Elias turn. Outweigh Harding or shoot hole. Elias no budge. Voice steel. Sarah know your property no more. Never was. Now my wife true no let take. Wilson eye blaze fury. Seem you situation no grasp Harding. This know your call. Moment that shot thunder sudden. Wilson stagger back pistol clatter floor. Door behind deputy stand smoke gun hand. Face set. Wilson floor crumple. Shoulder blood seep dark. Sheriff rush cuff snap. Frank Wilson. Arrest murder attempt official threaten. Sheriff voice iron. Deputy Wilson Hall as Sheriff Elias Sarah turn. Sorry incident this but safe now least. Wilson long cage go. Testimony Pennsylvania reach shore. Sarah still shake fear voice small. Step what? Sheriff gaze serious. Testimony get. Hunt announce. Brother no help now. Time question only till catch. Elias Sarah shoulder pull close. Thanks Sheriff. Oh deep. Office leave. Elias see Sarah face pale still but I fear no. Relief dawn slow like sun mist. Home go. Elias say soft. Sarah nod wagon mount farm return. First time feel real home pull. Thread heart tie. And in the days that followed, as snow blanketed the fields and white hush and winter's breath fogged the windows, Elias and Sarah wove their lives tighter. The farm no longer a hollow echo but a hearth where two souls found shelter. The testimony's shadow lifted slow, Pennsylvania wire confirming step hunt, Wilson brother cage rot. Life bloom, spring seed plant hand, harvest gold under sun, laughter ring house once silent. Years roll, farm thrive, child cry joy fill room, Elias Sarah love root deep as river run. Auction day memory fade scar sweet, reminder love choose strange way, miracle birth desperation ash. Frontier hard, but heart stronger, Elias Sarah prove, hope seed plant soil barren, bloom life full. So end tale but lesson linger, lose all seem, one act kind change all. What think you, love frontier find, or fate hand gentle? Share thought, story heart touch.